People, we just got a very juicy piece of information regarding future Nintendo hardware, the fabled Switch 2, whatever you want to call it, from none other than the CEO of Activision himself. Let's talk about it. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I wanted to discuss this recent bit of news that came out during the FTC hearing with Xbox Activision kind of versus Sony. If you don't know what's going on, Xbox trying to acquire Activision, the FTC blocked the deal. So now they're having this like 5 or 6 day long court process to determine the fate of that acquisition. Very exciting stuff. If you enjoy talking about the gaming industry and reading about it and kind of just learning the ins and outs of it, it's been very telling. You know, we're seeing emails from Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, to Jim Ryan, the head of PlayStation, and just all these internal documents that we're not supposed to see. PlayStation put out this, they had to show this excerpt from some sort of document, and instead of redacting it properly, they use like a really faint marker. So now we know like how long The Last of Us Part 2 was in development, how much it cost to make, $220 million, by the way. So just really interesting stuff, getting this kind of behind the scenes look at the industry, at least for Xbox and PlayStation. However, some really interesting stuff happened this morning pertaining to Nintendo. So if you remember back in December, and I did make a video on this, Microsoft made kind of this statement saying that if they were to acquire Activision, if the deal goes through, they will promise to provide Call of Duty to Nintendo platforms for 10 years. That was the deal. That was a huge deal because Call of Duty famously has not been on the Switch at all. There were a couple of Wii U games. It was actually pretty prolific, I want to say, on Wii and DS, although always lesser versions. Phil Spencer said that basically they would be at parity with the other versions. We're going to get a day and date, you know, feature complete version of Call of Duty on a Nintendo platform. They never said what platform, though. They never specifically said Nintendo Switch. So most people believed, okay, they're future-proofing. This most likely means the next console, right? We actually got a really interesting piece of information from Bobby Kotick, like I said, the CEO of Activision. So let me read through my man Benji Sales on Twitter. If you have not followed this guy on Twitter yet, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go give him a follow. Really great coverage of this FTC hearing, but also just the games industry, sales data, all that fun stuff. So he said, just revealed Bobby Kotick and Nintendo have had active talks about the next generation Nintendo console. So that right there, very interesting. You know, we're at that point, right? I've done videos talking about the Switch 2, let's call it, and while I do think it's a little bit further off, you know, than most people think it's next year, some think it's early 2024, late 2024, I think it's early 2025, so not even really that different, but early 2025 is what I'm guessing. But we're at that point now where, at least at the very high level, Nintendo is talking to the CEO of Activision, the CEO of Ubisoft, right? Yuzo Goma. They're talking to these big publishers, saying, hey, we're going to have this stuff coming out probably in, you know, 1 to 2 years, which is really interesting that we're at that point now. But the tweet continues here. Also says that apparently next-gen Nintendo console is close to Gen 8 power, in parentheses, PlayStation 4/Xbox One. So that's it. That's the piece of news. I think most people probably expected this, right? I myself have been saying that I think the successor to the Switch, assuming it's a hybrid, would hope to compete with the base PS4. And then on a surface level, you might read that and think that's not very good, but, and I'm not a hardware expert or even a software development expert, but I know there are so many things going on right now that even a base PS4 could have some very comparable looking visuals, right, with DLSS and FSR. So there's a lot of stuff going on, upscaling, that can make a base PS4 in today's market actually pretty appealing. Plus, you have to consider Nintendo is technical wizards with, you know, they're getting Tears of the Kingdom running on a piece of hardware from basically 2012, right? So if their next console or the next hybrid, whatever it ends up being, is as powerful as the base PS4, I don't think that's any issue to worry, especially because Bobby Kotick here is saying that he's pretty confident that if this console comes out, if it is as powerful as a PS4 or around there, they think they can get Call of Duty running on that console, which makes sense. Call of Duty is still releasing on PS4 and Xbox One. I'm not sure. I don't think I know anybody that plays those versions at this point, but they're still on there. I'm sure they still sell very well, but we did get some more tweets from Benji here. He said, in other words, Bobby is saying the console is aligned with Gen 8 power, and knowing that it's reasonable to assume they can make games for it, considering what they did with the PS4 and Xbox One. That's just what I just said, yeah. He also said that some of this is redacted, so who knows if he was given exact specs or just rough performance targets. So, yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to know that we're at this point, at the very least, with Nintendo and third-party publishers, and setting those expectations, right, for third parties to kind of know what they're aiming for. I'm not sure what the rough timeline was for the Switch or the NX, but you have to assume it was in 2015 that those talks really started happening, maybe even late 2014, because the NX was announced in 2015 in an investor call. So we're at that point. Development is definitely happening. I don't think we've heard anything concrete in terms of, development kits being out there. I'd imagine rumors for that will start really popping up later towards the end of this year. But very soon, I think the floodgates are going to open. There was, during the Q&A for Nintendo's investors, actually just a couple days ago, I didn't make a video on it, and people were acting like this was news. I didn't really see why. Nintendo reconfirmed that Nintendo account will carry over to the next kit system, basically, which they actually had confirmed like 3 years ago. Everybody was making a huge deal out of it, like, oh my god, that means that the fact that they said this means that we're getting, Switch 2 very soon. They said that years ago, right? I believe in 2021, maybe. So that inherently isn't that big of a deal, but, they're being coy with investors, right? They're not giving us all the details. They're just reaffirming like, hey, it's going to, carry forward. Don't worry about it. I think that heavily suggests that backwards compatibility will be a thing, right? But we're at the point now where Nintendo, they're going to have to start saying something soon. Something's going to start slipping. We saw Yves Guillemot of Ubisoft, I think I'm saying his name right. He said that Nintendo encouraged them being Ubisoft, to wait until their next piece of hardware to release Mario plus Rabbids. Not necessarily saying, oh, Switch 2, I'm calling it that as a blanket term. I know it might not be called that. Switch 2 is coming out next year's. Just wait until then to release it. That's not what he was saying, or Furukawa was saying, or Nintendo as a company was saying. They were more so saying that, in general, you shouldn't release more than one game in a franchise per console, which we see Nintendo do very often. The Switch has actually been a big exception to that rule with Splatoon, Xenoblade, Fire Emblem. But in terms of your core, Mario Kart, Smash Bros, Animal Crossing, right, 3D Mario, you only get that one. So they were saying basically that, you shouldn't release 2 Mario plus Rabbids games on the OG Switch. Probably wasn't the best financial decision, and as we saw, that game didn't do super hot. But these high-level talks are happening. The Switch 2, or next piece of Nintendo hardware, is definitely cooking, and I'm very excited. I'm excited, 2015 was a rough time, and even more so 2016, I want to say, for Nintendo fans, because we were just eagerly awaiting that next moment, that next piece of news for the NX, because the Wii U had nothing. We had a couple games in there, but it was very dry. With the Switch, I'm very eagerly awaiting to see what this next piece of hardware is, how they carry everything forward, what kind of backwards compatibility there is, all that stuff, and what kind of lessons they can learn from the Switch. But there's so much software coming out right now that, like, I don't feel like I'm just thirsting for this information right now, I'm excited, and I'm very curious to see, like I said, maybe later this year we start getting a lot of rumors, and even just reports like this from Bobby Kotick. Now, this was during a FTC court hearing that we probably should not have known about, but point still stands. I'm excited to hear more. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think of the next Nintendo console, hybrid, whatever it ends up being, next generation Nintendo? What do you think of it being comparable to PS4 in power? That's pretty big news. I mean, I think a lot of people assume that, but it wasn't anything that was concrete. The CEO of Activision saying it in court, it's pretty concrete. It's a pretty concrete, like, okay, it's gonna be about that. Like Benji Sale said, we don't know if he knows, exact specs or just rough kind of goals, their target performance for the Switch 2 or, next generation device, but he has an idea which will likely end up coming to fruition. And like I said, with DLSS and FSR terms, I don't fully understand myself because I'm not super into that whole side of things. Very exciting stuff. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo news, coverage, reviews, all that fun stuff. And follow me on Twitter. Until next time, folks. Bye-bye.